Well, now, before we settle in, if you enjoy these quiet little stories, do an old man a kindness. Give it a like and subscribe if you'd like to hear another one tomorrow night. All right then, let's begin. In a village so high in the hills that clouds sometimes napped in the gardens, lived a boy named Leo. He had eyes the color of river pebbles and a mind always reaching forward, like ivy trying to climb the sun. The village was small, just a loop of cobblestone houses, a school with a crooked bell tower, and a bakery that smelled like home even before you opened the door. But what made the village special wasn't what was in it. It was what sat just beyond it, on a mossy cliff edge, half hidden in mist, the cloudmaker's cottage. It was a strange little home made of rounded stones and pale wood, with silver pipes twisting from its roof like the fingers of an old tree. Smoke never rose from the chimney, but every few days a soft, drifting cloud would puff out of one of the pipes and float into the sky, shaped like a teacup or a whale or a feathered hat. No one ever saw who lived there. The village children told stories about a wizard with cloud-white hair or a retired sky giant in slippers. But Leo didn't just wonder. He watched. One morning, after a night of heavy rain, Leo stepped outside and looked up. The clouds were thin now, quiet and tired. Raindrops clung to leaves like pearls, and the cobblestones were slick beneath his boots. He followed the puddles as they led, almost purposefully, toward the edge of the village and the hidden path to the cloudmaker's cottage. He hadn't planned to walk there, but sometimes curiosity doesn't knock. It just tugs gently at your coat sleeve until you follow. The path curved between tall grass and soft stones. Birds flitted in the hedgerows, shaking droplets from their wings. As Leo walked, he saw a shimmer in the air. Not sun, not fog, but something brighter, softer. He rounded a bend and stopped. There, kneeling in the garden outside the cottage, was an old woman in a patchy blue coat and a wide straw hat. She was holding a tin pail, carefully collecting the last drops of rain from leaves, flowers, and smooth stones. She didn't look surprised to see him. "You came just after the rain," she said with a smile. "Good timing." Leo blinked. "Are you the cloudmaker?" "Sometimes," she replied, standing slowly. "Other times I'm a tea drinker or a moss gardener. Today, I suppose I'm a rain gatherer." She handed him a second tin pail. "Want to help?" They moved through the garden together, collecting water in quiet. The woman introduced herself as Maeve, and her hands were soft but strong, like the earth after spring. Leo asked question after question, and she never once told him to hush. "Where do the clouds come from?" "They come from stories," Maeve said, "and feelings, and steam kettles sometimes." "Do they have names?" "Of course, but they rarely use them unless they're being scolded." When the pails were full, Maeve led Leo inside the cottage. It smelled of mint leaves and old paper, and the walls were lined with jars, labeled in neat handwriting. Snowlight, early spring whale song fog, laughter wind rain from the day grandfather danced. Leo stared in wonder. "You keep the weather." "I keep its memories," Maeve said. "Clouds are like dreams, hard to hold, but easier if you believe they matter." She showed him her cloud machine, an old copper thing with gears that clicked like cicadas and a bellows that wheezed like a content cat. Leo watched as she poured their collected rain into a curved basin at the top. Then she turned a wooden crank, humming softly. The machine hissed, whirred, chimed, and then A puff of cloud rose from the spout, shaped like a curled-up cat, stretching and yawning as it floated out the window. Leo gasped. "It's beautiful," Maeve chuckled. "It's sleepy. Rain makes slow clouds." As the sky outside deepened into evening and the first stars blinked through, Maeve handed Leo a small jar. Inside was a single silver bead of water, swirling softly. "This is from today," she said. "You helped gather it. One day you'll need to remember how it felt to listen to the rain. Keep it safe." Leo cradled the jar carefully. "I'll come back," he said. "I know," Maeve smiled. "The ones who listen always do." He walked home as the clouds overhead curled into gentle shapes. Behind him, the cloud-maker's cottage puffed a little sigh of mist into the dusk, and that night Leo placed the jar on his windowsill where the moonlight found it. It shimmered just a little, like the start of something. The following week was all sun, blue skies so wide and deep they made you squint with wonder. Leo still visited the cloudmaker's cottage in his mind every night, thinking of Maeve's warm voice, the cloud machine's hum, and the small jar of rain now glowing softly on his windowsill. On the 7th morning, a breeze arrived. It started as a whisper at the window, slipping through the shutters like a secret. But by mid-morning, it was dancing through the village, stirring laundry on lines and flipping pages in open books. The wind wasn't cold or mischievous. It was curious, playful. "Wind with purpose," Papa said, watching the weather vane spin and stutter. "Something stirring." Leo looked at the compass Maeve had quietly slipped into his coat on his last visit. It was small, round, and copper, but unlike a normal compass, its needle didn't point north. It spun slowly in place until the breeze passed by. Then it stilled, pointing toward the edge of the village, toward her cottage. Leo grinned. The wind led him back like a gentle tug. As he crested the final hill and the chimney pipes of the cloud-maker's cottage came into view, a shape bounded past him, fast and strange, a tumble of smoke, a puff in the shape of a dog. It barked, yes, barked, before leaping into the sky and evaporating into a swirl. Leo laughed. At the gate, Maeve was seated on a low stool with a spindle between her knees. Wisps of cloud floated around her, and in her hands she held long, nearly invisible threads of air. She looked up as he approached. "Ah, good. Wind's been asking for company." "Are you spinning air?" Leo asked, wide-eyed. Maeve nodded. "Some winds don't blow in gusts. Some come in threads, thin and quiet. You can spin them if you listen closely enough." She held out the spindle, and Leo took it, the wooden rod warm from her touch. The thread trailing from it tickled his fingers like spider silk. "Want to try weaving a wind?" Leo swallowed a breath of excitement. "Yes." She guided him to a loom in the garden, a curious thing made of driftwood and humming wire, shaded beneath a wide parasol stitched from clouds. Together they wove the threads, breezes that smelled like pine and song, gusts shaped by laughter, and one slow wind that carried the distant scent of cocoa. As they worked, Maeve told stories. "Once," she said, "there was a breeze that only carried lullabies. Parents would hold their crying babes to the window, and the wind would hush them to sleep." Another time she whispered, "I once gathered a wind that came from a canyon where no one spoke. It carried the weight of all the unspoken words. That one became a rain cloud, and it wept for 2 days." Leo listened with wide eyes, hands weaving, breath slow. When they finished, the woven air was a silken panel of light and movement. It shimmered even though there was no sun. "What happens now?" Leo asked. Maeve smiled. "Now We hang it in the sky." She led him to the back of the cottage, where a silver ladder leaned against the air itself. Leo followed without question. They climbed, not far, just high enough for the tops of the trees to nod in approval. Maeve took the panel of woven wind and clipped it to the sky with two delicate clasps. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sky sighed, and where the panel hung, a breeze stirred gently, curling and drifting, spreading soft light across the clouds. It was calming. Leo's chest felt warm. "That's from us?" Maeve nodded. "Now anyone walking below will feel that wind, and maybe, just maybe, they'll feel a little more quiet inside." As they climbed down, Leo held tight to the spindle she had given him. "It doesn't feel like work," he said softly. "It feels like tending." Maeve's eyes twinkled. "That's because it is. Clouds, wind, rain, they're like feelings. They don't need to be fixed, just understood." Before he left, she gave him a small satchel. "For your own winds," she said. "You've got threads of your own to weave. You'll know when it's time." Leo walked home under a sky touched by their handiwork. The breeze that followed him wasn't the same as before. It was kinder now, familiar. That night he placed the spindle beside his jar of rain on the windowsill. Both shimmered quietly, like they were remembering something beautiful together. By midsummer, the fields were buzzing with bees, and the meadows bloomed like patchwork quilts. The clouds in the sky had grown lazy, floating slowly as if they too were enjoying the long days. Leo had visited the cloudmaker's cottage 3 times since the wind weaving. Each time, Maeve had taught him something new: how to coax dew into tiny pearls, how to whistle for shy breezes, how to untangle a tangled puff of sky. But on the morning of his next visit, the air felt different. The sky was dim, though it wasn't raining. The light had softened, blurred at the edges. The village rooftops seemed to vanish into gray. Fog had rolled in, not sharp or cold, but thick and drowsy, like an old blanket pulled too high. Papa Joe looked out the window and narrowed his eyes. "That's the forgetting fog." Leo tilted his head. "What does that mean?" "It's not bad," said Papa Joe, stirring his tea. "But you'll see, some fog just hides things. This fog, makes you forget why you were looking in the first place." Leo clutched his compass and followed the path to the cloudmaker's cottage. But the fog was thick. Even the birds were quiet. The compass needle spun lazily, unsure. For the first time, Leo felt a little lost. He walked slowly, peering into the gray. The path felt longer. The trees seemed unfamiliar, even though he'd walked this way so many times. The mist curled around his feet and whispered doubts he couldn't quite catch. He sat down on a flat rock, frowning. Why was I coming here again? He reached for his satchel and found it was missing. No spindle, no wind threads, no rain jar, nothing. Panic flickered. He stood, turning around and around. Which way had he come from? And then a voice, software singing, not words, but hums, familiar. He followed the sound until the fog thinned just a little. And there, through the gray, stood Maeve, holding a lantern made of woven cloudlight. It glowed with the same hush as moonlight on snow. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," she said gently. Leo shook his head. "I lost my way, and my satchel. I forgot why I came." Maeve smiled. "That's what the fog does. It makes you forget what matters most." She reached into her coat and pulled out a bundle, his satchel, untouched. "It didn't take anything," she said. "Just hid it until you remembered how to ask for help." Inside the cottage, everything felt warmer. The fog pressed against the windows, but couldn't enter. Maeve set the lantern on the table, and the room filled with the faint scent of lilac and clover. Leo sat quietly, wrapping his hands around a warm mug of clove tea. "I didn't like that fog," he said at last. "No one does," Maeve replied, "but we all pass through it eventually." She leaned over and opened a drawer beneath the counter. Inside were dozens of cloud jars, each foggy and sealed with wax. "Each of these came from someone's forgetting," she said. "We gather it, not to trap it, but to remember what it tried to hide." She handed one to Leo. Inside, faint images swirled. A child's drawing, a name carved in wood, a worn red ribbon. This one belonged to someone who forgot how brave they were. Leo swallowed. "Will they remember?" Maeve smiled. "Only if they choose to. That's the thing with forgetting. It never fully wins unless you let it." Later that afternoon, Maeve handed Leo a small piece of pale cloud, shaped like a puzzle piece. "Your fog left something behind," she said. "It belongs to you now." He turned it over in his hands. It was cool, but not cold, light, but not empty. "What does it do?" "It reminds you that being lost isn't the same as being alone." As he walked home, the fog began to lift, not all at once, but in ribbons and curls. Trees reappeared. Stones found their names again. The path softened into certainty. That evening he placed the puzzle-shaped cloud next to his other treasures on the windowsill. The fog hadn't taken anything, but it had left him something new. And sometimes that was even more important. Thunder arrived not with a roar, but with a hush. The air stilled. Leaves paused mid-drift. Even the bees fell quiet. Leo stood at the back fence of the garden, watching a line of dark clouds roll in like a slow, sleeping bear. There was no wind, no rush, just pressure, deep and low, settling across the village like a thought you hadn't yet spoken. He looked down at his little compass. Its needle trembled, not in fear, but in readiness. It pointed once again toward the far edge of the village, toward Maeve's cottage. Leo packed his satchel quickly. The wind spindle, the fog puzzle piece, the rain jar, and the smallest of his wool blankets. Then he tucked Papa Joe's knitted scarf around his neck and headed into the rising stillness. The path to the cloudmaker's cottage felt different under stormlight. The trees seemed taller, their leaves darker. The air smelled like the moment before music begins. And the clouds above, they weren't angry, just waiting. When he arrived, Maeve was sitting on the porch, her coat dusted with raindrops that hadn't yet fallen. She patted the seat beside her. "You came." "You knew I would," Leo said, pulling his scarf tighter. Maeve nodded. "Some storms don't need to be watched, but this one needs to be heard." Inside the cottage, every jar on every shelf had been covered with a cloth. The cloud machine was quiet. The lanterns dimmed. Maeve lit a single candle and placed it on the hearth. The flame flickered, not wildly, but curiously. Then she turned to Leo and handed him a small, ear-shaped shell. "What is it?" he asked. "Something that listens back," she said. "Tonight's storm carries more than weather. It brings voices, feelings, caught in the clouds. If you listen close enough, you might hear what the sky has been holding." They opened the cottage windows wide. The storm rolled in, not with violence, but with depth. The rain began like a murmur, then a whisper, then a steady, soft drumming on the roof and garden stones. Leo held the shell to his ear and closed his eyes, and then he heard them. Not words exactly, not stories, but feelings, a weight too big to cry out, A laugh caught in the chest, a goodbye never spoken, a song half remembered, aching to be sung again. The storm was full of them, not pain, just truth. Maeve's voice was gentle. Some clouds carry more than water. They carry what people don't know how to say. They sat in silence for a long while, wrapped in the warmth of the candle and the hush of the rain. Then, just before midnight, Maeve stood and opened the old cabinet beneath the cloud machine. She pulled out a round, empty jar made of smoky blue glass. "I think it's time," she said. "Would you like to do it?" Leo stepped forward. He held the jar in both hands, heart thudding softly. Then, just as Maeve had taught him, he turned the brass crank on the side of the machine. Steam hissed. The gears clicked. The room filled with a low hum, the sound of something very old waking up. Then the spout opened, and out drifted a single cloud. It was shaped like a curled leaf, or maybe a sleeping fox. It floated toward the ceiling, turned once, and slipped out through the open window into the night. Leo stared at the empty jar. "Did it work?" Maeve touched his shoulder. "You didn't just gather a storm. You released it." As the rain softened into mist and the thunder faded into memory, Maeve poured them both tea and added a pinch of powdered lightning from a tiny tin labeled Restless Thoughts. They sat on the porch until the stars peeked through the thinning clouds. Leo leaned his head against Maeve's shoulder and sighed. "I didn't know storms could be gentle," he said. "Most things can," she replied, "if someone's there to listen." That night, Leo placed the smoky blue jar on his window sill. It didn't glow like the others, but every time the wind stirred, it hummed, very faintly, with the soft memory of rain. Summer began to stretch toward its quiet closing. The bees grew slower in their flights. The light tilted more golden in the late afternoon. Even the leaves, green as they still were, rustled with a new sound, like they were beginning to whisper goodbye. Leo felt it too. Not an ending exactly, just a turning. The clouds had changed since the storm. They drifted lower, softer, as if carrying something they didn't want to forget. And each morning, when Leo looked out over the village rooftops toward the horizon, he felt something blooming inside him, a question still forming, a longing quietly unfolding. So he packed his satchel one last time. Inside, the fog-shaped puzzle piece, the spindle for wind threading, the tiny jar of rain, the smoky glass from the storm, and Maeve's compass. Then, on a morning dressed in mist and birdsong, he stepped onto the path. The cloudmaker's cottage looked unchanged, but as Leo drew closer, he saw that every pipe on the roof now shimmered faintly. Light pulsed from them, not bright, but steady, like breathing. A soft trail of cloud curled from one chimney, shaped like a sleeping squirrel. Maeve stood in the garden. She was trimming a patch of glowing flowers with silver scissors, their petals fluttering like candle flames. "You're just in time," she said. "The sky has something to tell you." Leo tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Maeve gestured toward the cottage. "Today, we don't make a cloud. Today, we become one." Inside, the cottage had changed. Gone were the neatly stacked jars. The shelves now held memory clouds in open bowls, each giving off a soft shimmer of color and scent. Cedar smoke, salt wind, lemon tea. The cloud machine had been polished to a golden gleam, and beside it stood a tall wooden ladder, leading straight up through the ceiling. Maeve followed Leo's gaze. "That leads to the top of the sky." Leo blinked. "Is that real?" "It's real enough," she said with a small smile. "Sometimes When you've listened long enough, the sky invites you in. She led him to the base of the ladder, then handed him the compass. It no longer spun or ticked. Instead it glowed, soft, steady. Maeve pressed a hand to Leo's back. "It's time for you to see where the light goes when we let it go." Leo swallowed gently, nodded, and began to climb. The ladder passed through the ceiling like mist. Each rung felt warm under his hands. As he climbed higher, the air thinned, not into cold, but into clarity. The higher he went, the lighter he felt, until his boots no longer touched each rung. He was floating now, weightless as a thought. Then the ladder ended, and he stepped onto something soft and real, though it looked like sunlight. He was standing on a floor of cloud. Above him, a sky of swirling colors, far deeper than any sky he'd seen from below. All around him jars, hundreds of them, suspended in the air, glowing softly. Each one a memory, a storm, a hush, a dream. Some were large and golden, others small and silvery. All of them drifted gently, as if breathing. Leo walked between them, and as he passed each, he heard whispers, not words, but feelings. A father rocking a newborn, a girl saying goodbye at a train station, a garden blooming after 30 years, a boy hearing the rain for the first time. Then he saw it, his jar, the one he'd made with Maeve, the rain from the day he met her. He reached toward it, and it floated into his hands. Inside, the droplet shimmered. He closed his eyes. And this time he heard it, his own voice, younger, asking, "Do clouds have names?" Maeve's laugh, the silence of the fog, the song of the storm, his mother's lullaby. The sky wasn't just holding weather, it was holding everything. He stood there a long time, letting the jar warm his hands. Then a shape approached from behind, a cloud in the shape of a girl, glowing faintly gold. She reached out and touched the jar in his hands. "Thank you," she whispered, though her lips didn't move. Leo smiled. "You're welcome." She drifted away, carrying that memory with her, and in that moment he understood. Each cloud was a vessel, a story, and someone, somewhere, was always listening. When he climbed back down the ladder, the cottage felt quieter. Maeve sat by the window, stitching a new cover for a jar that hadn't been made yet. Leo sat beside her, the jar still tucked under his arm. "You saw it?" she said softly. Leo nodded. "It's more than clouds." Maeve smiled. "It always was." He looked around the room. "Will I? Will I do this someday?" he asked. "Make clouds? Keep them safe?" Maeve looked at him, her eyes bright. "You already are." Before he left, she handed him one final gift, a blank jar. No label, no light, just potential. "This one's for your own sky," she said. "Fill it with whatever you need to remember." Leo walked home as the sky softened into dusk. The clouds drifted gently above, no longer mysterious, just meaningful. That evening he lined all 5 jars on his windowsill: rain, wind, fog, storm, and the new one. He didn't need to fill it just yet, but he knew he would, because some memories need time to ripen, and when they do, the sky will be ready. That night, beneath his quilt and the hush of crickets, Leo whispered, "Thank you, Maeve." And from high above the village, drifting through the clouds, came the faintest reply, "Keep listening." The end, but not really, because skies never stop speaking. And that's our story for tonight. I hope it brought you a little peace, or at least something warm to carry into your dreams. If you'd like to hear more, just subscribe. I'll be right here by the fire, waiting with another tale. Sleep well now. And good night, my dear.